Thank you. So our platform today is going to be with Juliana Paré-Blagoev. Thank you. It's who is an associate professor of human development and psychology in the School of Education at Johns Hopkins University. I met Juliana because I go to the improv group. I think I said it before, and Juliana is also there as some other people in this group. Before we begin, can you please show on spotlight for a minute? The topic of education is one that I think is very important for many of us. I think many of us, for all of us. How many of us have worked in education? Please raise your hand. Some point in your life. Keep your hands up. How many of you have children or grandchildren who go to school and are educated and whose future you're hoping will be good? Finally, how many of you yourselves have gone to school and been educated and understand the importance of how school and what you're taught as a child is in determining what sort of person, what sort of citizen you're going to be in the future? So obviously, I was kind of being cute there, but obviously this is a topic that's important for all of us. And if you don't think it's about the education, I don't take all those kids being educated now or not educated will be the citizens of tomorrow. And this is what we're really concerned about, the future. So with that introduction, Juliana, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Shor, and thank all of you for taking the time to be here. This is a very emotional topic for me, as well as one that is at the center of my professional life as a scholar who conducts educational research. And I think that it is an issue that I hope will catch your interest. And as Dror discussed, throughout the introduction, be something that piques your interest in a way that supports you potentially to take action. I'm going to stop share because I have too many things open and I want to make sure that the one that I'm sharing is the one that I intend to share. There we go. All right, are you seeing the front slide? Great, thank you. So first, I just want to say one quick thing about this slide in the front. I have my name in brackets, and I have them in brackets because those brackets represent the null set, which is a mathematical symbol that used to be the mascot for my alma mater, New College of Florida. It's a very quirky mascot, but appropriate for a school that is very quirky. They didn't used to have any traditional sports, and which is now a mecca for sports, and they are investing very, very heavily in sports and Greek life. And they have chosen the new mascot, which is actually a perfectly fine mascot. We just wouldn't have wanted it imposed on us. The new mascot is the Mighty Banyans, which is, as I say, a very reasonable mascot. But it is not the null set, which is something that implies that it holds all potential. And it, again, was something that was imposed which is a feature of a process that we're seeing in multiple places from kindergarten through university, widely spread geographically across the United States, that public education as an institution is being attacked in a way that threatens it existentially. Dror gave me a perfect opening by asking you all to raise your hands in regards to education and your experiences. So as you listen today, I'm going to ask you to listen with intention. I would like you to hold in mind, to generate and hold in mind either a powerful memory of yours related to education, or a powerful memory when somebody else unexpectedly moved from being a bystander to being actively engaged in a way that mattered to you in your life. I'll give you just a moment to identify that memory for yourselves. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about freedom to learn. I'm going to say a very few things just to give you a flavor of what's happening at New College then and now and how we're resisting. And also then a larger period of time talking about the anatomy of the sort of takeover that is represented by what's happening at New College, but isn't in any way unique to it, and some additional context. The overall theme that I have here is that I am not bystanding still. Freedom to learn. There have been a raft of educational intimidation laws that are sweeping the country. Educational intimidation is defined as legislation that politicizes classrooms and curricula, that exacerbates campus divisions, and silences discussion of core issues in America's history and future. In a statement that was signed off on by hundreds of, let's say 100 plus retired college and university presidents, they indicated that such legislation is a threat to the mission and independence of the higher and K-12 education sector as a whole. I note that these are retired public education faculty, presidents, and other administrators, retired because we are in a space of retribution and retaliation, and many people don't feel safe speaking out. Across, when I started giving talks like this and started this experience, we didn't have the Israel-Palestine war going on, and we didn't have the in-your-face evidence that there is a lot of complication around who can speak out and about what in what ways. So this educational space of people feeling fearful preceded that. And it focused on things that many of us would consider non-controversial, like that we ought to be able to have sociology courses, that we ought to be able to say that racism exists, that racism has been a force in American history. Those are the kinds of issues that I'm saying and that these folks are writing about when they say that there is a threat. It's those issues. This is a map from PEN America of where educational intimidation bills and other laws and state policies have already passed, as well as places where they have been proposed. In some places, you're looking at only 1 or 2 such bills. In other places, it's upwards of 20. In my experience as an alum of New College and in thinking about the space where a public college has come under attack, I've spent time thinking about what the freedom to learn really means. And to me, I've come to think of it as something that undergirds many of the other freedoms that we would like. Why would you peaceably assemble? Why would you try to express yourself? Why would you care about freedom of the press or of association unless you cared about the freedom to be able to learn things and to teach? Drora talked about education being important to the future citizenship. Freedom to learn is fundamental to democratic self-government. If you don't have the freedom to learn, you really don't have any business voting because you don't know what you're voting on. And I think that effort to control what people learn and are exposed to is a normal part of any educational effort. Education is extraordinarily value-laden, but trying to control it to an extreme degree is a hallmark of an authoritarian state. Normal sort of bread and butter, what should people learn and how much should you weigh this stuff and that stuff, those debates will continue forever, and they should, because we as a human society will have changing values and changing ideas about what's important. As the volume of what we might learn grows, the debates about what we should learn and what we should invest public dollars in will also grow. So this is not a difference. What's happening here is not introducing a debate that's unusual, but the character of the debate and the purpose of it represent the existential threat. So New College. New College was created as a independent private institution originally in 1960. It was founded, then opened to all. And I'll tell you a little bit in a moment about the contract system. There is an informal book written in the early days covering how it was brought to be. And it was called Skating on Thin Ice, which is apt for now. This is a picture of that front building work that would have been right behind where those students were sitting and right near the music room. The school is small and began small, and it stays small. The reason I picked these dates here, it became public and part of the University of South Florida in 1975. And that's really important because when it was under USF, it had kind of an umbrella of protection, but it was also an existential space when the college might have closed. In 2001, it separated from University of South Florida and it became its own separate Honors College of Florida. This again was a space where we thought that things might go belly up. And here we are in 2023, it's become a symbol of the future of higher education in America. This is a small graphic that represents a timeline that we have been populating, we meaning alums and other members of the New College community. The red events up on top, this is January 31st, and this particular image takes us up to about June. These are different events related to the takeover, so a lot that happened very quickly. These are events related to our resistance down here. At New College, the fundamental organization of it is that each student is responsible in the final analysis for their own education. It is highly individualized. Faculty prepare narrative evaluations rather than grades. There are no grades. There's a contract system. Every term you meet with your advisor and you think through how this semester is going to move you towards the goals that you have set. Rather than traditional majors, there are areas of focus, and that focus is something that you also develop during January independent study projects. You have to do 3 of them, and everybody has to do a senior thesis. In Florida right now, when Governor DeSantis took the governorship, not just at New College, but across the state, he took people off of the college's Board of Trustees system. At New College in particular, one of the new Board of Trustees termed themselves soldiers in DeSantis's army. That was Chris Rufo, who is the progenitor of critical race theory as the boogeyman of American education, being very clear, he is not Kimberly Crenshaw, who created critical race theory as a legal theory, but Chris Rufo is the person who helped push forward critical race theory as this sort of boogeyman of the way that the far left, as he thought of it, was trying to make all white people feel bad and to say that racism needs to be at the center of all education discussions. The Board of Trustees at New College is represented here because these are different think tanks or other institutions where the new soldiers in DeSantis's army, the appointed Board of Trustee members, where they hail from. These organizations are well known in the far right community and in other spaces because of the degree to which they are pushing a very particular approach to centering marketplace freedom over political freedoms in a way to drive policy. And that is a combined thread across all of them, although they also have other distinctive features. I say that because I want to say that the Board of Trustees are supposed to have at their heart the mission of a given college or university. Instead, these boards of trustees have at their heart, evidenced by their actions, not just by what I'm saying, but they seem to have at their heart the goal of promoting the ethics and mission of these institutions rather than New College's, which is to support students to pursue their own educational dreams. And they do that extremely well. New College produces the most, by proportion, the most student graduates who go on to earn a terminal degree of any public school in the country. And it is 9th in the nation for doing that. So as an example, Harvard undergrads are 13th in the country for going on to go and get a final terminal degree. So New College outperforms Harvard in that way. Since January 31st, when the New College Board of Trustees had their first meeting, 38 faculty have left, which was, well, this is actually a little bit old. There's been a few more that have left, but 40% of the faculty left the college. 20 disciplines were represented in who left. Half of those had already had tenure. The gender studies program was closed. You may know that several years ago in Hungary, Viktor Orban took over their national university. One of the first things that they did was close the gender studies program. There is a close alliance between the far right, including Christopher Rufo and Viktor Orban. So the map of how to take over higher education is one where there's very active dialogue. In terms of who's in, New College didn't have a single coach that was paid. Now they have 11 of them. 12 administrative leadership positions have turned over. Only 3 of the hires for these administrative leadership positions have any higher ed experience. Instead, their background and skills include membership in Moms for Liberty. I'll say a little more about who they are later. In lobbying, in election campaigns, Jeb Bush's former campaign manager has been hired there, in legislative analysis, and in the creation of super PACs. They are also creating the Freedom Institute, which is a think tank model. We'll learn more about that at the very end section on the big picture of these things. The student space, what isn't valued? What's not valued is legacy characteristics, students who are in it for the academics, students who have an excellent academic background, and students who protest. A student who used an expletive during a Board of Trustees meeting and then peacefully left has been expelled. A student who spat on the ground in protest has been forced to leave. Students are no longer allowed to chalk on campus. So you can't take your chalk and advertise anything or make a political protest in any way on campus. What's valued? A sports interest, a Christian homeschooling background, being a student coming from Hungary. They've been specifically recruiting in those spaces. So where this leaves me is that hope comes from action. So here's some thoughts about how we went from what just happened to bring it on. These pictures all have specific meaning in regards to protest activities. When the New College graduation in May this year was clearly going to be an uncomfortable event that didn't honor New College traditions, the the fourth-year students who were graduating decided to make their own commencement. Michael Moore was among those who joined by video to give a message of hope. A very quick timeline to let you know how quickly things were happening. So January 6th, I'm sure no accident, there was the announcement of the new Board of Trustees. We began creating an online community, huge uptick in how the alums began to pull together. They had the first Board of Trustees meeting and they fired the president without cause. This became a kind of Pearl Harbor moment for me in the sense of realizing how immediate the threats were going to be. As the alumni community continued to work together, we fundraised, we worked together to sense make, to understand what it was that was happening. We began building norms and procedures for how we were going to organize, including Sunday town halls and a lot of legislative lobbying. We consolidated things that we were doing through June and July. We made legal filings in the following months. You can see some of the structure that we began to create here, that it was organized around legal defense, communications, supporting students and faculty on the ground, and a set of resistance actions among, I would say, groups that come together, come apart, come together, come apart with different formations. So I have several sort of pods of people that I work with, depending upon what we're doing. And they also have different overlapping pods of people that come together on WhatsApp, on Signal. I never used WhatsApp. I never used Signal. I hardly ever used Slack. And now I have lots of messages going all the time in those spaces. And so do many other people who didn't have that happening before in their lives. This is another set of some of the specific kinds of things that we've done. And we are, in the spirit of other sort of poetry, these are things that I would say to the Board of Trustees. We were an academic morsel. We were called out for being woke, but now you find that morsel is sticking in your throat. We're trying to make it as painful as possible for them. We think that New College is gone. We are very sorry and also motivated by that reality. I'll make these slides available, and you're welcome to look in more detail at the different types of things that we're doing in the legal and other space by following these kinds of links. We're entering a new phase where we're rising up for ourselves and others. We're trying to improve collaboration with Save New College and other organizations. We're doing additional research. We're working with others to get out the vote and to help bystanders stand up to defend the freedom to learn and fight what is really a evidence of authoritarianism in our borders. So an anatomy of the takeover. Before we move into this, I want you to stop for a moment and recall that important memory that you're listening with intention around, that educational memory or that memory of somebody who stopped being a bystander. So I just want you to have a moment to reflect on that before we move into this space. So I let you know that the Board of Trustees were announced as a new slate, pretty much a new slate on January 6th. So in Florida, what you've seen in multiple places is that the government and legislature is undermining public education, not just at colleges and universities with the college trustees, but they're also influencing the K-12 school board population. That's important because in many cases, these folks have control, whether direct or through strong influence of hiring and firing. They're implementing new policies and creating a new climate. The effects of the hiring and firing include creating massive fear and uncertainty among the community and an emboldening among those who are mission aligned. Mission aligned is their terminology at the Board of Trustees. It's the way that they refer to students who, and faculty and administration who share their vision. You see changes in New College. Specifically, they closed the Gender Studies program. They closed the DEI, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Office. You see that happening in Texas and North Carolina and Oklahoma and other states as well. They also manipulated the housing. The influx of new students because of a huge, massive push to recruit during the spring semester, offering scholarships to students who were going to be brought on for a sports program that didn't exist, right? As of January, there wasn't a sports program, but they recruited more than 100 athletes to come in. They recruited 70 baseball players alone. University of Florida, for their baseball team, has under 35 students. So this tiny little school recruited 70 baseball players. So this small school, with all of these new students coming in, they kicked all of the upperclassmen out of the dorms and they put them into hotels instead. It dramatically and abruptly changed the dynamic of what was happening on the ground in everything from weekend parties to who was able to easily access the cafeteria. New College is in a space where it's a little bit of a food desert, so it's a big deal, a big dramatic shift. And you see these kinds of things also happening, not with housing, but other kinds of things happening in terms of closing off different kinds of curriculum in the K-12 space, like Sarasota School Board, which is run by a woman named Bridget Ziegler, who has been in the national news recently because of certain kinds of hypocritical acts that we won't describe at the moment. All of these things as a whole lead not just on the New College campus, but abroad, but in general, where these things are happening across the state, to a decreased sense of safety and security, and actual decreased safety as well. Decreased access to necessary academic courses at New College. Many students had to leave because the courses that they would have wanted to take in botany, such woke spaces as neuroscience, those faculty were gone. They were no longer able to do that. It leads to a lack of trust. Faculty don't know exactly who's going to be mission aligned or not. At New College, the new president is going around and offering people very large sums of money in order to stay for the people that he wants to continue. All of those things make it a reduced ability to even note, to document, and to fight the kind of grift and corruption that we see evidence of. In addition, at the K-12 level, I just want to point out that when Richard Corcoran, who's the new president of New College, was previously the commissioner of education in Florida, he was put into office at a sort of essentially a midnight meeting in December of 2017, possibly 18. So the board that has the authority to appoint the commissioner of education, they appointed him at a special meeting in December. There was no materials provided to review for him. So there's no public record about why he should be the commissioner of education. He had no prior experience, but he was just appointed without consideration of any of his potential strengths for that. As commissioner, he hired Hillsdale College representatives to rewrite the civic standards. Hillsdale College is a private, highly conservative liberal arts school in Michigan, and it is also the place that designed the 1776 curriculum. If you don't know what that is, the 1776 curriculum is an effort to push back against what was created to highlight the role, a curriculum that was created to highlight 1619 as a very important date in American history. It's the date that the first slave ship offloaded people who were enslaved to be enslaved in Virginia. So that 1619 curriculum led to Donald Trump and Hillsdale College pushing forward their own 1776 curriculum. These are the people that were brought in to rewrite the civic standards in Florida. It was a very strange situation worth looking into. If you haven't ever watched a PragerU YouTube video, I highly recommend that you do. PragerU produces hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of little pithy videos. You may have heard of the ones that they produced that let us know such things as that enslaved people learned important skills that helped them personally. So that's the kind of thing that PragerU produces. And in Florida, recently, PragerU has been added to the list of acceptable resources for K-12 educators to use. There is also a massive expansion of voucher programs. A voucher program in the new legislation means that anybody can take, quote unquote, their money out of the public education system, regardless of their income, regardless of whether they have ever had a child in public education before. It is anticipated in Florida that at least 10% of the public education budget will be lost to people using it for vouchers. what we know across the country from prior experience in other states where the voucher systems are put into place. They are overwhelmingly used by wealthy individuals, overwhelmingly used by people who never had their child in public education to begin with. If you're given an $8,000 voucher and you do not have the means to come up with the additional funds for a private school tuition, and you don't have the family flexibility to provide transportation for your kid to that, you're not going to be able to make use of that voucher. So the vouchers are not designed or effective for supporting individuals without means to access choice. They are fundamentally a way, and this isn't just empirical, they're fundamentally a system that advantages individuals who were already in private school settings for the most part. And when I say that, I mean in between like 60 and 80% in different states. That's who's using it. We also see voting and democratic norms being targeted in Florida. There has been a substantial increase and a creation of a Byzantine set of rules for whether or not an organization is allowed to register people to vote, and an increase in the fees that you can be forced to pay if you, as an organization that tries to register people to vote, don't follow all of the new laws. So you can be, on the hook for upwards of $100,000, which for small organizations, especially the small organizations that work with marginalized populations to get out the vote, it's very daunting. There are some other kinds of impacts that we see of this takeover strategy. Looking at the K-12 teacher vacancies in Florida in 2019, at the start of the school year, there were just a little bit over 2,000 vacancies. In January of 2023, 5,000, close to 5,300. In August of 2023, 7,000 K-12 teacher vacancies. It's becoming very, very hard for Florida schools to recruit and keep teachers. And the statistics here are mirrored around the country. Even when there isn't a teacher vacancy, we've been seeing since pre-pandemic, there actually has been a significant increase in the rate of teacher vacancy, but this is an exponential leap. In Florida, in superintendents getting hired, between the period of 2020 to 2023, more than 45 superintendents in Florida's 67 school districts left. It's the highest turnover in Florida's history. And it's reasonable to expect that that turnover is directly related to the draconian approaches of the DeSantis administration. I want to point out, though, that DeSantis is very much not the architect of these things. We're seeing this happen across the country, and those organizations that are represented now on the New College Board of Trustees, in many cases, those organizations are absolutely central to the creation and influence of model policy and legislation that is being introduced in those education legislation takeover elements. So we anticipate that there will be fewer highly qualified education professionals able to support our students. We also see that there's been travel advisories by the NAACP, Human Rights Campaign, Florida Immigrant Coalition, all giving warnings about Florida. New College itself was taken off the list of safe and welcoming environments for LGBTQ. Reduced access to books. I already mentioned the introduction of PragerU materials and the Hillsdale employees. A little bit of history. You may want to go and look up Lewis Powell's memo, produced in 1971 at the request of the Chamber of Commerce. It became a founding document of neoconservatism. In this memo, he lays out the ways that economic liberties, in his view, should be more important than political liberties, that America is defined by its economic system, by being a free economic system, as opposed to being defined by a commitment to liberties that reflect civil rights and human rights. There's 29 sections in the Powell memo. 11 are focused on how education represents the single most dynamic source of attacks to the American system, as he lays out in August of 1971. Lewis Powell, the next spring, was named to the Supreme Court. So you can ignore the on your own, that's from and it should have been taken out. But in speaking to the business community, the Powell Memorandum indicated that political power is necessary. And he argued in that memo that the business community within America was not playing its appropriate role in government processes. So there was a massive growth of Washington lobbyists, of PACs and corporate public affairs offices from the period of 1971 to now, going from something like 200 lobbyists to more than 12,000 today. In the proliferation of far-right think tanks like Heritage Foundation, Manhattan Institute, these other ones that I named before, those things all came out of the Powell memo. It's a very direct line. There is an argument on the far right that the leftist progressive faculty in higher education are creating a socialist state. However, research about comparing the differences between what happens in higher education settings versus what happens in these think tanks is that in the think tanks, there's open advocacy for very, very specific viewpoints, that's not so much the case in higher ed settings, that it's much more diverse. At think tanks, there's a relative weakness of scholarly credentials and policy experience, even though they are producing white papers all the time that seem to stand on their scholarly status and that seek to change policy. These think tanks argue that higher education positions, the take that they take regarding higher education seems to be derived from this focus on a perceived decline in the teaching of Western culture. It comes from a space of opposing affirmative action and multicultural studies, and it called for decreased funding in higher education. The dissertation that I'm pulling from here was published in the early 90s. So the calls for decreases in funding for higher education gradually became more and more potent, even in places like California, where students used to be supported to the tune of about $20,000 per student per year, down to about 11,000. I want to say something quickly about parallels, and then I think I will close up so that we can move to the Q&A. There is an organization called the American Legislative Exchange Council. Again, it grew out of the Powell memo. You may or may not have heard of it. The State Policy Network is sort of the operationalizing, make it all happen at the state level. ALEC produces model legislation. It recruits and mentors legislators at the state level. You know, we're free to do that in the United States. That makes, you know, in and of itself, that's okay. But they are doing it in a way that really highlights this very, very narrow, far right-wing ideology that's promoted within this think tank space. So upwards of 70% of our current national Republican congressmen come through the ALEC recruitment and mentor at the state legislative level. And they've been very active in their model legislation at weaponizing woke. In the K-12 space, we are now seeing a effort to replicate what the ALEC does in the legislative and legislator space to work towards doing this in the school member space. If you look at the Family Policy Alliance website, you'll see that they're trying to recruit school board members and train them so they can promote a biblical worldview inside of the school board space. They're drafting and sharing policies and generally working to stoke and weaponize fear. You can look at this link when you have these slides on your own, but Baptist News is a religious news source that is not known for being particularly liberal, but they are calling out the concern about the interest in reducing the separation of church and state in the school board space in the way that these groups are doing so. When you look at this on your own, I recommend you look at the Parents Defending Education site, the Moms for Liberty site. Both of these are what are called AstroTurf organizations. They have a sheen of being grassroots, but both of them grew very, very quickly. And when you follow the money, you see billionaire dollars that allows them to have a very sophisticated network very quickly. I'm very proud and excited that in the most recent school board elections, Moms for Liberty folks did not do well. People are pushing back in good and effective ways, but as voting roles are continuing to be purged, as the effects of gerrymandering continue to take place, we need to be mindful of being engaged with our local community so that we can vote the way we want to vote, and that others can as well. I'll skip this piece, but just know that our school boards are particularly an area of concern because of the number of incumbents that are planning to run again. We're having a lot of people leave school boards. It's a very challenging space to be at the moment. So I just want to recommend to all of you that in this, human boat that we are all on, we can't just be glad that the whole isn't on our end. We all are in the same boat, and whatever your views are, it's a good idea to be active and to not be bystanding at this moment. A big thank you to Hampshire College, which opened its arms to new college students. It offered them the opportunity to finish out their degree with the same tuition as they would have been paying at New College, even though it's a private institution. So a big thanks to them for not being bystanders. And a thank you to all of you for being here today and for the kinds of things that you do in your own lives. I know that they are there by virtue of the type of organization that you're involved here within the Ethical Society. And as a member of the Baltimore Ethical Society, a big thank you to Dror for letting our communities come together in this space.